When the USIA presented its anarchist bomb defense, they underestimated the diligence of the man appointed to investigate the case, Colonel Hugh W. Ogden. Ogden, a well-regarded military lawyer, recognized immediately that the company's defense was an attempt to exploit xenophobia and political fear. He determined to root the trial entirely in physical evidence and engineering fact. Ogden transformed the Masters hearing, which became the longest and costliest court case in Massachusetts history, into a deep forensic examination. He required both sides to present their case with exhaustive technical detail. The resulting record produced over 20,000 pages of testimony from more than 1,000 witnesses. The key to the plaintiff's case was the testimony of a professor of engineering who performed the first systematic analysis of the tank's remnants. His findings were irrefutable. The blueprint lie. The steel plates used in the construction were significantly thinner than what was specified in the initial design. This was the first undeniable proof of corner cutting. The failed math, the factor of safety. Every industrial container is built with a factor of safety typically 4 to 5, meaning the structure can hold 4 to 5 times the required stress before failure. The professor's calculations revealed the molasses tank had a factor of safety of barely 2. It was already dangerously stressed before any new molasses was added. The brittle rivets. The sheer force of the explosion, described as the tank unzipping from the bottom, pointed to the catastrophic failure of the rivets. Testimony confirmed that the steel surrounding the rivet holes was poor quality and likely weakened by the constant small leakage. The cold temperature made the compromised steel brittle, allowing the pressurized CO2 from fermentation to initiate an unstoppable fracture. This detailed scientific evidence utterly destroyed USIA's defense. The company's own internal practices were put on trial. Arthur Gell, the treasurer who oversaw the construction, was forced to admit that he had no engineering experience, skipped the water test, and ignored the pleas of workers and neighbors who reported the leaks. He had, in essence, signed the death warrant of 21 people by prioritizing budget and speed over public safety. The final ruling against USIA in 1925 delivered a major financial settlement, but its most profound impact was on the very mechanics of American governance and corporate responsibility. The molasses flood became a powerful legal precedent that changed how America built and regulated itself. Engineering licensing. The ruling prompted the state of Massachusetts to create the first mandatory licensing and inspection requirements for civil engineers. No longer could a layman like Gell be put in charge of such a consequential project. The law, which was soon adopted by other states, created the professional integrity and accountability that engineers must uphold to this day. The burden of proof for negligence. The case, Door versus United States Industrial Alcohol Company, became a landmark in tort law. It firmly established the principle that a corporation is responsible for foreseeable consequences stemming from faulty construction or poor design, even when the ultimate catalyst is complex, like the combination of fermentation and temperature. The plaintiffs proved that the catastrophe was not an act of God, but a predictable failure of engineering standards. This detailed, scientific evidence utterly destroyed USIA's defense. The company's own internal practices were put on trial. Arthur Gell, the treasurer who oversaw the construction, was forced to admit that he had no engineering experience, skipped the water test, and ignored the pleas of workers and neighbors who reported the leaks. He had, in essence, signed the death warrant of 21 people by prioritizing budget and speed over public safety. The final ruling against USIA in 1925 delivered a major financial settlement, but its most profound impact was on the very mechanics of American governance and corporate responsibility. The molasses flood became a powerful legal precedent that changed how America built and regulated itself. Engineering licensing. The ruling prompted the state of Massachusetts to create the first mandatory licensing and inspection requirements for civil engineers. No longer could a layman like Gell be put in charge of such a consequential project. The law, which was soon adopted by other states, created the professional integrity and accountability that engineers must uphold to this day. The burden of proof for negligence. The case, Dorr versus United States Industrial Alcohol Company, became a landmark in tort law. It firmly established the principle that a corporation is responsible for foreseeable consequences stemming from faulty construction or poor design, even when the ultimate catalyst is complex, like the combination of fermentation and temperature. The plaintiffs proved that the catastrophe was not an act of God, but a predictable failure of engineering standards. This press attention was, though often voyeuristic, critical to the victim's case. It kept public pressure on USIA and ensured that the subsequent legal investigation by Colonel Ogden could not be easily buried by corporate influence or Red Scare paranoia. The physical transformation of the disaster site was slow and deliberate. The cleanup and demolition of the surrounding wreckage took months. The destroyed buildings were eventually cleared, and the area remained vacant for years as the court case dragged on. When the money from the settlement was finally paid out in 1925, many of the victim families and injured individuals used the funds to relocate, scattering the tightly knit community further afield in Boston. When the North End was finally rebuilt, the lessons of the molasses flood were literally cemented into the new structures. The elevated railway. The tracks that had been knocked off their alignment were reinforced and secured with renewed attention to structural integrity. The tank site. The land where the lethal tank once stood was transformed into Copp's Hill Park, a simple open space dedicated to recreation, not industry. No industrial facility of that scale was ever allowed to be built there again. The molasses flood became an enduring piece of Boston folklore, often recounted with disbelief. Yet beneath the humor and the strange nature of the event lies a serious truth. It was a hard-fought victory for the rights of the common worker and immigrant against the overwhelming power of big business. The legal precedent set in Dorr versus USI Industrial Alcohol Company mandated that henceforth every major construction project in an American city must be treated as a potential public safety hazard and scrutinized by certified experts. The sticky, sweet death of 1919 ensured that the foundations of modern American infrastructure and safety regulations would be built to a higher, more ethical standard. The smell may have dissipated, but the ghost of the brown wave remains a powerful reminder of the cost of corporate arrogance.
The ultimate victory in the 6-year legal battle hinged on mathematics and materials science. The plaintiffs' lead expert witnesses, specifically professors of engineering and metallurgy, transformed the chaotic scene of the disaster into a rigorous, cold equation of corporate failure. Their testimony proved, without doubt, that the tank's rupture was not an accident, but a predictable, statistically certain structural failure. The cornerstone of their argument was the engineering principle of the factor of safety, FS. This is the ratio between the maximum stress a material can withstand and the maximum stress it actually experiences in use. For industrial tanks holding a heavy, non-compressible liquid like molasses, a safe factor of safety in 1915 should have been at least 4 or 5. This meant the tank should have been capable of holding 4 or 5 times the volume of molasses it was rated for before rupturing. The expert witnesses calculated that the actual factor of safety for the Purity distilling tank, based on the thinness of the steel plates and the flawed riveting pattern, was shockingly low, barely 2.
When the tank was filled close to capacity on January 12th, the internal stresses pushed the structure dangerously close to its point of failure, leaving virtually no margin for error. The slightest additional pressure, such as the fermentation-generated carbon dioxide or the thermal expansion from the new shipment of warm molasses, was enough to push the factor below 1.0, leading to inevitable collapse. The focus then shifted to the physical evidence, the twisted, broken fragments of the tank itself. Metallurgists presented startling findings regarding the quality of the materials. Insufficient manganese. The steel used in the tank's construction was found to be low in manganese, a crucial alloying element that gives steel ductility, the ability to bend without breaking. Low manganese steel is prone to a condition called brittle fracture, especially in cold weather. The transition temperature. The experts testified that on a cold January day, the steel had a high ductile to brittle transition temperature. This meant the metal was inherently vulnerable to sudden, catastrophic failure, acting more like glass than tough steel. When the internal pressure spiked, the brittle steel simply could not stretch or deform slightly. It shattered. This explained the bizarre machine gun fire sound reported by witnesses. It was not the sound of an external bomb, but the noise of rivets snapping off and the brittle steel plates instantly unzipping. A rapid, violent chain reaction of fracture that occurred faster than the speed of sound could carry the initial rupture. Furthermore, the testimony highlighted the flaws in the riveting itself. The tank was assembled using lap joints, overlapping steel plates held together by thousands of steel rivets. Crucially, the rivet holes were likely punched or poorly drilled, creating microfractures in the brittle steel. The constant oozing of molasses through these weak points was visible proof that the rivets were overstressed and failing long before the final collapse. The scientific arguments were given human context through the testimony of the forgotten men, the common laborers who had built and maintained the tank, only to have their warnings dismissed. Mr. Arthur Gell's own workers confirmed that the tank was considered structurally compromised long before January 1919. They testified to the constant audible groaning the tank made when it was filled, often referred to as its last right sound. They had complained to Gell and other supervisors that the tank needed reinforcing or emptying, but these warnings were met with threats of dismissal, or at best were ignored in the corporate rush to profit. One particularly damning piece of evidence was the testimony of a painter who had worked on the tank. He confirmed that Purity Distilling ordered him to paint the entire structure a dark brown color, precisely to conceal the molasses leaks that were trickling down the sides. This single act was the clearest evidence of willful concealment and gross negligence, demonstrating that USIA knew the tank was compromised, but prioritized appearance and production over public safety. In his final judgment, Colonel Ogden synthesized this scientific and human testimony. He concluded that the combination of thin, brittle steel, faulty riveting, and the failure to test the tank, the skipped water test, created a condition of low factor of safety that was the direct and singular cause of the disaster. The explosion was not a random act of terrorism, but the predictable, mathematical consequence of unscrupulous industrial practice. This engineering proof was the final, devastating blow to USIA's defense. Beyond the court case, the molasses flood spurred immediate and lasting municipal reforms, fundamentally changing the relationship between Boston's city government and its businesses. In the wake of the disaster, the city faced intense public criticism for its lax oversight. The building department was reorganized, and new protocols were mandated. Where previously there was little to no inspection required for industrial storage facilities, the city now required detailed, stamped blueprints from certified engineers before any large-scale industrial construction could begin. Furthermore, The city established a system of surprise inspections to ensure that materials and construction methods matched the approved plans, a direct response to the discovery of the thin, low-manganese steel used by USIA. The city also undertook a massive review of its existing industrial infrastructure. Any structure that posed a potential hazard to dense urban populations was subjected to rigorous retroactive safety checks. This process was a financial and logistical burden, but it signaled a permanent shift toward precautionary regulation. The human consequences continued to unfold for years after the verdict. Many of the survivors suffered not only physical trauma, but lifelong chronic illness. Breathing problems, respiratory infections, and post-traumatic stress were common among those who had been submerged or witnessed the horrific scene. The settlement money, though inadequate for the scale of the loss, provided a critical foundation for the rebuilding of the North End community. It allowed many families to escape the cycle of poverty and established a new sense of empowerment. The legal victory itself, the successful challenge of a major corporation by a marginalized immigrant community, became a source of enduring pride and a testament to the resilience of the North End. The story of the Great Molasses Flood, initially a confusing tragedy, settled into its rightful place as a cautionary and foundational tale in American history. It stands today as a stark reminder of the ethical responsibility inherent in engineering, the power of science in the courtroom, and the necessity of regulations to protect public safety from the inevitable pressures of profit. The sticky, sweet scent eventually faded from the cobblestones, but the indelible mark of accountability remains.
Fitch's strategy was methodical and brilliant. Root the case in irrefutable science and human experience. He recognized that the corporate defense was designed to distract the court with fear-mongering and political rhetoric. To counteract this, Fitch spent months gathering testimony that was less about emotion and more about observable facts. He commissioned the detailed metallurgical and structural analyses that exposed the tank's critical flaws. He painstakingly tracked down every laborer and neighbor who had witnessed the leaks, the groaning, and the hasty paint job. The courtroom drama centered on Fitch's cross-examination of USIA's treasurer, Arthur Gell. Fitch methodically exposed Gell's lack of qualifications, his failure to perform the mandatory water test, and his dismissive attitude toward the tank's obvious warning signs. By framing the disaster as a matter of simple, documented negligence, a man who couldn't read a blueprint put in charge of a 5-story high bomb, Fitch stripped away the corporation's high-minded defense, reducing the entire tragedy to a classic case of corporate avarice over human life. Fitch's tireless, years-long commitment was essential. He kept the marginalized, grieving immigrant families unified and focused during a protracted legal fight designed to exhaust their resources and break their will. His enduring legacy is not just the settlement, but the successful demonstration that in the American system, even the largest corporate power could be held accountable if the evidence of neglect was strong enough. The fate of the case ultimately rested on the shoulders of Colonel Hugh W. Ogden, the respected military lawyer and state-appointed auditor. Ogden's role was crucial and unusual. He was not a judge presiding over a jury, he was the master, an impartial arbitrator tasked with hearing all the complex testimony, weighing the evidence, and reporting his definitive findings back to the Massachusetts Superior Court. Ogden brought a military-trained rigor and an unwavering focus on facts to the proceedings. The legal spectacle lasted years, involved over 1,000 witnesses, and produced 20,000 pages of transcripts, all filtered through Ogden's meticulous process. His greatest challenge was resisting the dramatic pull of USIA's anarchist theory. The corporation's narrative was sensational, timely, and politically charged, but Ogden steadfastly demanded physical proof.
he refused to allow speculation and prejudice to substitute for scientific evidence. He repeatedly pressed USIA's experts to provide concrete proof of explosives, shrapnel, or a detonation point, and when they failed, he dismissed the theory as unsubstantiated conjecture. Ogden's final 1925 report was a masterpiece of legal and technical clarity. He stated plainly that the collapse was due to the tank's inherent structural weakness and the low factor of safety. By making a clear, definitive finding of negligence based on engineering principles, Ogden's report became the authoritative, unassailable basis for the court's ultimate ruling and the subsequent financial awards. Ogden's impartiality and insistence on technical truth not only delivered justice to the North End, but also set a towering example for the role of judicial oversight in complex industrial and technical cases. His ruling was a direct rebuke to the prevailing laissez-faire attitude toward industrial regulation, cementing his place as a quiet hero of American legal history. The Molasses Flood was not just a historical event, it was a geochemical incident with a long-lasting physical impact on the Boston landscape. Even after the city used salt water to clear the visible molasses, the ground was irrevocably altered. Seepage into the soil. Millions of gallons of the dense syrup soaked deep into the sandy, porous soil of the North End waterfront, which was largely landfill. The molasses, rich in organic sugars, became a semi-permanent subsurface contamination. The long-term scent. This buried, fermented organic material is the scientific explanation for the enduring legend. For decades after the disaster, residents claimed they could still smell the sweet, fermented odor on hot summer days. The heat would draw the molasses vapor up through the cobblestones and asphalt, an ambient, non-visual memorial to the disaster. Modern discoveries. Even today, during deep municipal excavations in the area, construction crews occasionally uncover pockets of dark, sticky soil that, when disturbed, still emit a faint, sickly sweet scent. The earth itself, in this small corner of Boston, remains slightly sticky, a physical testament to the density and volume of the material that struck with such deadly force.
The tragedy of the Boston Molasses Flood, while unique in its bizarre form, was tragically common in its root cause: the brutal calculus of corporate negligence that characterized the late Gilded Age and the Progressive Era in America. The decades surrounding the turn of the century saw rapid industrial growth and the rise of powerful trusts and corporations that operated with minimal government oversight. For USIA, just as for many industrial giants of the time, the drive for wartime profit had eclipsed any consideration for public safety. The story of the thin steel, the skipped water test, and the ignored warnings was not an isolated incident. It was a repeating motif in American industrial history. Consider the other massive deadly industrial calamities that preceded or coincided with the Molasses Flood. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, 1911. Hundreds of garment workers in New York City died because management locked the fire escape doors to prevent theft and unauthorized breaks. This was a clear case of prioritizing property and control over human life. The General Slocum disaster, 1904. Over 1,000 people died in a New York steamboat fire because the vessel's safety equipment was corroded, useless, and intentionally neglected by the owners to save money. These disasters, including the one in Boston, shared the same DNA. A powerful corporation knowingly took risks, operated with substandard equipment, and resisted regulation, all while placing the burden of that risk squarely on the working class and immigrant communities. The Molasses Flood, with its absurd medium of death, was simply the Boston version of a nationwide epidemic of industrial callousness. The court case against USIA therefore transcended the sticky streets of the North End. It became a crucial battleground in the Progressive Era movement for regulatory reform. The progressive ideal held that government needed to step in and apply the principles of science, efficiency, and law to curb the excesses of capitalism and protect the public interest. The Molasses Flood provided the irrefutable evidence that reformers needed. The case for professional licensing. The realization that an accountant, Gell, could oversee a critical engineering project like the molasses tank was a powerful rallying cry for the professionalization of engineering. Reformers argued that the complexity of modern industrial life required trained, licensed experts whose primary allegiance was to scientific safety, not to the company balance sheet. The mandate for municipal oversight. The disaster exposed the utter failure of Boston's municipal government to monitor industrial structures. This failure fueled demands for stronger, better-funded city building departments with the authority to proactively inspect and even shut down dangerous private facilities. The legal victory ensured that regulatory agencies, once established, would have the full weight of the court system behind their findings. The Molasses Flood, by forcing USIA to pay millions and by leading directly to the establishment of mandatory engineering licensure in Massachusetts, delivered a tangible victory for the progressive movement. It demonstrated that corporate accountability could be legally enforced, setting a powerful precedent that would inform environmental and safety regulations for decades to come, including those that led to the formation of agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, long after the fact. The total financial payout from USIA, while eventually reaching around $628,000 in 1925, or approximately $11.4 million today, represented more than just compensation. It was a cost finally imposed on recklessness. The total economic damage, however, was far greater. The immediate financial loss. The immediate damage included the destruction of buildings, the elevated train line, the firehouse, and the goods stored in the freight yards. This physical damage was estimated at over $100 million in modern currency. The labor and cleanup costs. The massive cost of the multi-week cleanup, involving thousands of man-hours and the use of expensive fire equipment, was borne largely by the city and the public.
The settlement, therefore, was never a total compensation, but rather a strategic legal victory that forced the corporation to acknowledge its fault and pay a punitive penalty. This act, enforced by Colonel Ogden's definitive ruling, was the ultimate message to American industry. The financial cost of negligence will, henceforth, be greater than the cost of responsible construction. The Molasses Flood thus remains an indispensable historical case study, a bizarre catastrophe that, stripped of its strangeness, reveals the fundamental and often lethal tension between industrial profit and public safety in early 20th century America. While the lawyers, Fitch and Ogden, battled in the judicial chamber, the practical salvation of the city depended on men of action. Chief among them, Captain J.G. Eaton, commander of the USS Nantucket. Eaton was the officer who, without hesitation or waiting for city orders, immediately dispatched his company of over 100 cadets and sailors to the disaster site. Eaton's decision was instrumental in mitigating the disaster's death toll. His men were trained in swift, disciplined action, and their immediate presence provided the only organized, large-scale relief effort in the crucial first hour. More than just providing manpower, Eaton and his crew solved the central riddle of the cleanup: how to dissolve the molasses. Watching the substance resist fresh water,
Eaton and his men quickly realized that only seawater had the chemical properties, the salinity, necessary to break down the highly viscous, sugar-rich goo. Eaton ordered fireboats to pump seawater directly from the harbor. This crucial, on-the-spot scientific solution, determined by a naval officer, was the key that unlocked the North End from its sticky prison. The molasses could finally be flushed out, though the process took weeks. Captain Eaton's quick thinking and decisive action were later lauded, highlighting how immediate, specialized expertise triumphed over the bureaucratic paralysis that initially gripped City Hall. The search for the missing and the documentation of the wreckage fell to police and public works foremen who undertook a grim, meticulous task. They faced a unique challenge of a search and recovery operation where the soil was a heavy, congealing industrial product. Foreman Patsy Cagliano, who supervised a large portion of the cleanup crew, became an unintended witness in the subsequent trial. His men, working in shifts, had to use dynamite in some areas simply to break up the thickest, hardened molasses into pieces that could be removed by shovels and carts. Cagliano's testimony detailed the horrifying reality of the cleanup, the difficulty of distinguishing debris from bodies, the omnipresent cloying scent, and the sheer volume of the material. The foreman's detailed logs, recording where victims were found, the depth of the molasses, and the estimated damage to each property, were vital evidence for Arthur P. Fitch. These logs provided the court with a ground-level, irrefutable chronology of the destruction, countering USIA's high-level theoretical defense. They quantified the devastation, establishing a dollar value on the destruction of homes, the loss of livelihoods, and the sheer cost of restoring public infrastructure. Their detailed, tedious work ensured that the true physical and financial scope of USIA's negligence could not be understated in court. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 left a profound psychological scar that lingered longer than the smell. For the residents of the North End, particularly the children who survived, the memory of the wave became a lifelong source of anxiety. The fear was primal and specific, the terror of being immobilized. The sense of being caught in a slow, suffocating death trap haunted the survivors. Many reported lifelong hydrophobia, or, more accurately, a fear of any viscous, inescapable substance. Even the simple sound of a strong gush of liquid could trigger acute anxiety years later. The sense of helplessness that a common, sweet household substance could become a sudden, overwhelming instrument of death shattered their faith in the predictable order of the urban environment. Furthermore, the experience of being blamed as anarchists by the company that killed their neighbors added a layer of ethnic trauma to the disaster. The community had to fight for justice while defending its own integrity. The final court victory, therefore, was not just a financial settlement, it was a psychological triumph that validated their suffering and proved their status as deserving, responsible members of the American body politic. The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919 stands as one of the most astonishing and bizarre catastrophes in American history. It was a 5-minute disaster that led to a 6-year legal war, a technical investigation, and an era of regulatory reform. It revealed the deadly arrogance of industrial power in the early 20th century, and, simultaneously, the resilience of the marginalized community it struck. The case, presided over by Colonel Ogden and fought by Arthur P. Fitch, proved that scientific rigor and legal accountability were stronger than corporate deceit and political fear-mongering. Today, as one walks through the revitalized North End, past the quiet park that replaced the behemoth tank, It is hard to imagine a 25-foot wave of syrup roaring through the streets at 35 miles per hour. Yet the principles forged in the aftermath, the requirement for licensed engineers, the factor of safety in construction, and the power of the class action lawsuit remain deeply embedded in the American regulatory framework. The Great Molasses Flood stands as a testament to the fact that sometimes the most outlandish events yield the most serious and enduring lessons, ensuring that the next time a corporation attempts to cut corners, the weight of history and the memory of 21 suffocated souls stands ready to hold them accountable.